So I was minding my own business using my phone the other day when I received this notification. The Go Green Challenge by some generic corporation. Go Green? Challenge accepted. So by pressing a few buttons, more trees appear. Okay, environmentalist. Do your part for the planet to unlock a staycation at a 5-star luxury hotel and more by opting in to the Go Green program? Consider me opted in. But what are these Go Green programs? You now have the option to reduce your carbon footprint by opting to pay $5 more for each of your purchases with us, and this sum will go towards buying carbon credits. Spend up to $1,500 worth of purchases in the next 2 weeks for a chance to redeem a staycation at this luxury hotel and save the environment. Worth it! If only it were that easy. If you're raising eyebrows about just how much some of these corporate initiatives actually contribute to solving climate change, you're not alone. Turns out, most of it is just their attempt to be the next sustainability queen. Your additional contributions are usually funneled into initiatives like solarization projects, carbon offsetting programs, donations to various NGOs, free sustainability kits, and so on. Sounds kinda great, except for two things. These programs, take carbon offsetting as an example, essentially means a business is paying someone else to remove a given quantity of greenhouse gas emissions that they're responsible for emitting. What these corporations are saying is, we'll still be emitting all this carbon into the air, but don't worry, we'll help conserve a forest somewhere in Indonesia where carbon in the air is being taken in. Doesn't seem like much of a reduction of carbon emissions as it is a shelving of responsibility. Second of all, why am I, a low-wage worker, forking out money to fund their dreams to become the next Greta Thunberg? Surely these companies worth billions have enough money to fund some projects? If just over 90 companies in the world are responsible for over 70% of all climate emissions, exactly how much impact does me refusing a plastic bag have? Let's start by doing a very bleak evaluation of our current climate situation. In 60 years, we've emitted over 100 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere, 100 times faster than previous natural increases. The past decade was the hottest on record. 2020 was more than 1.2 degrees Celsius hotter than the average year in the 19th century. All around the world, people are dying from deadly heat waves. Over 200,000 people were affected in 3 out of 5 provinces in Kalimantan that have been hit by floods triggered by deforestation and our changing climate. Massive floods in Thailand and landslides in South Asia have claimed hundreds of lives, all in late 2021. That sounds really awful. I think I need to lie down.
Nick, don't like that leh. It's okay, Wan. What you're feeling, right? It's climate anxiety, and fortunately or unfortunately, you're not alone in this. In fact, I know many other people who feel this way, and because of that, we decided to do something about it. You might have heard of us. We get it, you feel this anxiety for the future and you get all this depressing news about the world, about the climate, and you wonder, how much can you do as a small individual knowing that the people on the top need to change? Who comes first? We're stuck in this endless loop.
You understand? So what's the answer? You agree with me that companies should start taking responsibility and stop shoving it back to us?
Well, yes, but it's also a lot more complicated than that. Shall we start arguing?
You bet! Whose responsibility is it to solve climate change? Us individuals?
Governments? Corporations?
So when we talk about solving climate change, we're mostly looking at reducing carbon emissions. But a lot of the ways greenhouse gases get emitted are things that we don't really have control over as an individual. What I mean by that is, on a global level, greenhouse gases come from basically 6 different kinds of sectors in the economy. Electricity production, which is the burning of fossil fuels to make electricity, contributes to about 25% of the problem. Rearing livestock and clearing land to grow food adds to about 24% of global emissions. What stands out about all these systems that are contributing to climate change is that they're things that we don't necessarily have a ton of control over as individuals, right? How exactly am I going to tell a farm in Mexico or China to rear less pigs, or for coal companies to cut down on burning fossil fuels? So how can you tell me that the individual is responsible for climate change?
Well, you know, Nick, all these things are actually very related to the individual. Who eats meat from the farms? Who pays for their electricity bills? We do. So we can drive down the demand for livestock by choosing to cut down on meats like beef, like pork from our diets. Less demand for meat equals less supply, equals less livestock, equals less emissions.
Babe, I already do that. This sis was doing #Meatless Mondays all the way back in 2018. But even if I do change the things that are within my control, like cutting down on meat, using the aircon less, or stop shopping online, it only makes the teeniest, tiniest difference. And I mean tiny! And I'll prove it to you with some quick maths. So each Singaporean's unique carbon footprint amounts to 8.56 tonnes per capita based on population size in 2016. Say you want to reduce that. We'll be looking at the activities humans carry out that contribute most to carbon emissions. Let's say you did all of that perfectly. You committed 0 of those things. Good job! Out of the 50 billion tonnes of carbon emissions being emitted globally, you'd make a 0.0001712 reduction. Basically nothing. I think this is why I get incredibly triggered when large corporations telling me to do my part, because, excuse you, I am doing my part. You do yours.
So there's this really amazing podcast called How to Save a Planet, and one of the very key things they said was this. Climate change is a math problem, and the numbers are really, really big. So you're right. It requires a lot of skill before we start seeing change. It can get very tiring to only focus on reducing your carbon footprint. But in fact, did you know that the whole concept of reducing your carbon footprint was a marketing ploy by big oil to push the responsibility back onto the individual? So feeling guilty for forgetting to bring your own containers, your bottles, or even turning on the aircon is exactly what these big emitters want you to do. I'd invite you to think less specifically about your own carbon footprint and more about the positive influence your words and actions can have as a means of communicating that this matters. Did you know the SG Climate Rally was inspired by the one and only Miss Greta Thunberg? Don't you think it's so inspiring that one young woman all the way in Sweden who protested alone at 16, igniting millions of people to go on climate strikes, including the first ever climate rally here in Singapore where almost 2,000 people attended. We managed to talk to people at the top, people like politicians, like business leaders, and we shared our views to them. And since then, our voice has just continued to grow. Take Clementi Forest and the Dover Forest saga, for example. In 2020, over 50,000 people signed the petition. Environmentalists, nature lovers, and Singaporeans alike all coming together to protect our forests, which was slated to be cleared by the URA. And this eventually led to the announcement no immediate plans will be made for residential development and more stringent environmental impact assessments will be conducted. So we often think that in Singapore we're unable to affect change on any level. But the Clementi Forest saga is proof that individuals can make a difference if we try together.
But you know now that individual actions can't alone solve climate change. But together, we can exert pressure and demand for the changes that we see fit.
We're not saying raise our pitchforks and gather the troops. No, but what we want you to take away is to think about the actions that you can take outside of just reducing your own carbon footprint. And that could look like talking with your friends and family about the climate, chatting online on Reddit, or even attending Meet the People sessions with your MPs, emailing them, telling them that you are concerned, or even start a social media page. Why not?
So at the end of the day, does individual action matter in solving climate change? I gotta say, I'm pretty inspired to do better after following SG Climate Rally, but I want to know what your thoughts are.
Climate change. Whose problem? Mine? Yours? Government? Comment down below your thoughts.